So I'm going to give an overview of kind of what we're seeing in the market about why people are moving to yield and staking products, because I didn't want to give the exact same pitch that Simon gave directly after Simon. So are people familiar with Fireblocks, or kind of helpful to give a kind of high level overview of Fireblocks? Can I show of hands who knows Fireblocks in the room? Okay, excellent. That's good. So I'll give kind of a brief overview of Fireblocks, what we're seeing in the market, why we've integrated stETH as a product, and hopefully leave time for questions at the end as well. So for those not familiar with Fireblocks, kind of the largest provider of digital asset infrastructure. I think what's unique about us is that we're kind of working across all types of customer segments that you'll see. So we traditionally started on the crypto native side with OTC desks, market makers, liquidity providers, then moved into crypto exchanges, then moved into kind of fintechs and neobanks, the likes of Revolut, eToro, Robinhood, and others. And now we're kind of actually pivoting a little bit more into kind of banking and payments as business types. So pretty much, every use case that you'll see in digital assets, Fireblocks is a customer of Fireblocks is doing it, on the platform. And to talk about the type of scale that is, that's somewhere in the region of $500 billion a month the customers are processing, so $6 trillion last year. It represents 10 to 15% of the whole institutional crypto market, basically. So people that are moving scale are doing it on Fireblocks, kind of at a basic level. So based on that vantage point, I think we've got a really interesting positioning on the types of companies that are now moving into digital assets that are more from the traditional space. So obviously we've got people on the crypto native side, which are interesting, but really where we see interesting models are neobanks and I guess traditional exchanges and banks that are moving into the space. And I guess some of the reasoning behind it is on the slide here. So neobanks that are offering crypto, so the likes of Revolut and Nubank that build on Fireblocks, are growing at a much faster rate than neobanks that aren't offering crypto. So we're seeing in the market a really big requirement for, first of all, crypto, but then staking and yield related products thereafter. If you take the types of, I guess, crypto users that fintechs are interested in, it's the people who are kind of trading on a more retail basis. And then you've got, I guess, the larger crypto exchanges that are focused on the institutional side. So really what we're trying to, I guess, look at here is the people that are moving into the space on the traditional side who are going for retail first, but then institutional second. And I think, what's interesting that we're seeing in discussions with regulated institutions, banks, neobanks, FMIs, crypto is now expected from their customer base. So if you're a retail-facing business and if you can't offer a service like Revolut, then users are going to go to Revolut. So we actually have discussions on nearly a daily basis with banks who are essentially seeing outflows of 5, 10, 15% of deposits on a monthly basis to Revolut to trade crypto. So I think that's a really good example of the need that we're seeing in the market for crypto, and then thereafter yield-based products. People are also moving fast, right? So like the people that are quick to market in this space are the people who are going to get the most value here. So you'll see CFD trading platforms, brokerage platforms who've gained a massive amount of deposits, like Robinhood, for example, over recent years, and that's because they've been early to market with crypto. And I guess, launching with the right assets and the right types of pieces is also another thing, which is really important. So I think that's kind of a key piece. And I think what we're seeing in the market, which I think is really interesting, is this convergence between the TradFi segment and then the crypto segment. So let me kind of give a few examples based on this slide. So if you look at, let's take Kraken, for example. So Kraken has bought NinjaTrader, traditional securities exchange. They're now offering tokenized securities. That's kind of going into the banking space. If you look at Boney, they've built their whole institutional custody stack on Fireblocks, offering custody of Bitcoin and ETH, and now going to offer tokenized securities in the future. And then if you look at probably Stripe, it's the best example of a company that's bought 2 crypto companies in the last year, one focused on kind of payments flows and the other one focused on wallets. So they're basically building now with Tempo a vertically integrated stack which competes with pretty much every crypto company. So we're seeing this convergence, and really what we're saying is the people that are offering best-in-class services, and that means yield-bearing products and staked products, are the ones that are, I guess, going to win in this space that we're seeing. This is more of a sales slide, so we can skip this one. So I guess the important thing that we're talking about here is yield, right? So first off, launching crypto products. Then the next question is for many customers is how can I get yield on those assets that I have? And given that the majority of assets that are staked are in the ETH side, the natural question comes, what makes sense here? So what we've done is integrated Lido as a native staking provider. And essentially what that means is customers of Fireblocks can basically directly via the Fireblocks console go and stake their ETH and get staked ETH in return. And essentially, what that means is that for institutions that are moving in the space, they can again essentially offer this as a new product on the retail and the institutional basis. So they can go from offering ETH staking very quickly to offering staked ETH, and then they can actually access different forms of yield with that staked ETH token, either via DeFi or via CeFi related exchanges, whatever the case is. And I guess if you're looking at what the flow looks like at a high level is we essentially have this native integration with Lido, so we can basically enable customers to deposit via Fireblocks. So that could be I guess a retailer, an institutional user on an exchange or neobank. We essentially then allow them to, I guess, stake the request to the Lido protocol. Once the assets are staked, they receive the stETH, and then essentially they're able to either manage the assets on a more liquid basis, or invest them into a number of other, I guess, DeFi protocols or lending protocols. So really, we see yield, and in particular, staked ETH as a really interesting way for a lot of these crypto native people that are targeting crypto native users as a really good example of type of yield that we can get. And maybe just to talk about, I guess at a high level, what the kind of flow is that we're seeing customers use. We're seeing people launching just crypto. So as I mentioned at the start, launching across kind of 2, 4, 5 tokens. Normally that's a process that takes kind of 6 to 12 months, depending on the institution. They're then going for kind of 24/7 flows. So this kind of trade everything concept that we're seeing Coinbase adopt, essentially 24/7 flows. So if you're someone moving into the space and you can't offer the same, I guess, access as a Revolut, then you're probably not going to be successful as a business in terms of getting deposits. We're then seeing people being more interested kind of on the treasury side, so swapping between assets. And then I think finally, it's kind of the yield with guardrails piece. So I think getting access to these yield-related products is like a really interesting, I guess, next step for a lot of these users that are building in the space.